and just let people trickle in as they continue to join. We are recording the session just for everyone as a heads up. But I just want to say hi, everyone. I hope you guys are all having a great start to the week. We're really excited to have you all here with us today to learn a little bit more about extreme heat. My name is Gabby Patterson. I am the Climate Justice Coordinator with NC Warren. I want to welcome you all to this NC Warren hosted webinar, Ni Una Vida Mas, Extreme Heat, Climate Justice, and the Threat to Our State's Farm Workers. This webinar will explore how extreme heat and climate justice are connected, as well as how these increasing temperatures are impacting our state and its immigrant farm workers. Just a little background for NC Warren, if anyone is unfamiliar. NC Warren is a 37-year-old organization. Over the years, we have focused on a variety of environmental topics, including coal ash, toxic waste, solar, and changing weather, like increased storms and heat. As the climate crisis worsens, temperatures continue to rise and make extreme heat a growing concern for our country and state. This phenomenon negatively impacts everyone, but disproportionately affects certain communities, like those living in cities, those living without AC or other weather mitigation features in their living spaces, low-income individuals, people of color, and indoor and outdoor manual laborers like farm workers. El Futuro Es Nuestro, or It's Our Future, is a local worker-led organization advocating for the rights of H-2A and immigrant farm workers here in North Carolina. One of their campaigns, Ni Una Vida Mas, or Not One More Life, specifically focuses on protecting workers from the dangers of rising temperatures and works to address the lack of labor protections for this group of people. We are incredibly grateful to be joined tonight by the amazing Leticia Zavala, a coordinator with El Futuro Es Nuestro. Originally born in Mexico, Leticia and her family immigrated to the United States when she was a child. And since a young age, she has been involved in farm working and labor advocacy. She was a part of a farm worker union as a teenager and returned to the fields after college, working as an organizer for the Farm Labor Organizing Committee, where she pushed to improve working and living conditions for agricultural workers in Mexico and North Carolina. After the creation of the group in 2022, Leticia joined El Futuro Es Nuestro to continue organizing for workers on both sides of the border and highlight the exploitation faced by this community, including the risks of high temperatures and the lack of basic protections against heat. Leticia will present on the topic, and there will be a time for questions after that. Please use the Q&A function. You should see a button on the bottom of your screen where you could submit questions. We have another NC Warren staff reviewing the questions, and once they are answered by Leticia, the answers will show up and everyone will be able to see what was asked. With all that being said, I'd like to hand the presentation over to Leticia. Welcome, and we are so excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and thank you for NC Warren for having creating these spaces so that we can share some of our stories. I'm gonna share my screen. If I may. Okay, so thank you all for having us. So El Futuro Es Nuestro is, like Gabriela mentioned, a farm worker-led organization. We were founded in 2022. Most of our members are H-2A workers that realized during the pandemic that really there was the only way that they could really protect themselves was by creating their own organization that they could lead and make decisions in. And so these are our founders. They started first pressuring their union to create change and to be more democratic. After we were unable to do that, and a lot of the staff were fired, they decided to hire some of the staff that were fired and create their own organization. And so basically, we push for workers' voices to be heard in their workplaces. We are creating a consolidation of the organization, and then we advocate for legislative changes, not just in the US, but also in our home communities where these workers are from. Um, so this is just some pictures of the election, some of the workers that participated in. We are always creating leadership. We are always looking for opportunities for workers to lead, and so we organize through some of their needs, like sometimes they need food, they need services, they need to learn about income taxes and the IRS, their working conditions, and so we create those problems as opportunities for them to be leaders and to lead, whether it's through complaints, whether it's through advocacy, advocating other allies to support their work or to provide services for them. That's how we work. And then we address a lot of issues on the farm. We see issues of wage theft, green tobacco sickness, pesticides, mistreatment. There's a lot of retaliation, and there is a lot of issues with corruption, and so and housing. And so we're always working so that workers can understand what their rights are and then be able to address them themselves. Um, this is workers harvesting sweet potato. Sweet potato has started this season. We have a lot of issues with wages in sweet potato. Oftentimes, these buckets of sweet potato hold about 40 pounds of sweet potato, and they're paid 50 cents per bucket. They're required to harvest a minimum of 27 buckets per hour, and they have to be completely full. Sometimes if there's not completely full, or if there's a rotten sweet potato or a sweet potato that's too small, then they will deny them their chips, so they won't get paid those 50 cents for that sweet potato. These are examples of their housing. This labor camp, for example, is Barnes Farming. It's a farm that recruits over 800 workers every year. We did not get mattresses to be law until 2007. And so this is actually an improvement from some years back. This room holds 30 workers in one room. This is an example of our bathrooms. Oftentimes there's no privacy within our bathrooms. Oftentimes they're in the same building without walls next to the beds, for example. We often fight against meal plans. So sometimes there's growers that will not want to bother with fixing stoves or not having enough fridges, so they'll implement a forced meal plan for workers, and that means that they have to purchase their meals from the grower or the supervisor, and they pay between $95 to $130 per week for meals that are oftentimes insufficient, unsanitary, and expensive. They seldom have vegetables, and they don't take into consideration any dietary needs that workers have. And because they don't have access to refrigerators, if they want a cold drink, they have to pay $2 or more for drinks because they can't cool their own refreshments. And so these are some of our members. We presented in the Mexican Congress talking about the no more deaths. We have had 4 deaths since 2023 due to heat. Just recently, we saw a worker that was in a coma for 4 weeks due to heat. And we're also asking for the Mexican government to take responsibility for some of the things that happen while workers are here. So our campaign, of course, is to fight against the heat. There are no protections currently for workers with regards to heat, and we are asking for there to be a right to breaks, a right to clean, cold drinking water, a right to medical attention, and a heat protocol for emergencies to be in place in labor camps. These again are some of the workers that have passed away due to lack of medical attention, some of them due to heat. And I'm going to show you a video that speaks a little bit more about it. Buenas tardes. ¿Cómo están?
A mí me tocó ver a un compañero que como a las 9 de la mañana dijo, ¿sabes qué? Me siento mal, dice, ya no voy a salir del field. Pues ya llegando a la casa empezamos a escuchar nada más que andaba vomitando y vomitando. Le dijeron, ¿sabes qué? Pues si no vas a componerte para ir a trabajar, lo único que podemos hacer es mandarte para mí.
Si no nos hidratamos bien o quizás no podemos tomar un descanso cuando estamos en la labor, y pues realmente eso sí es duro para nosotros porque a veces sí nos cuesta hasta la vida.
Extreme heat is the biggest weather-related killer, larger than hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods. Each year, an average of 40 workers die from exposure to heat.
Pues ahora es bien distinto porque era el pilar de la casa, él lo era todo para sus hijos, para mí, y ahora ya no lo tenemos.
¿Hay como un ley o un protocolo que dice esto es lo que deben hacer en las reglas, como empresa, como dueño? There are no national rules to guarantee workers have breaks, shade, and water on the job. Industry groups and Republican politicians want to keep it that way. So I'm looking at the weather app and it says the real feel is 109. The workers are going to be out there at least till 7. So they're in the thick of it.
It overwhelmed me to think that people are forced to work in these conditions.
But a historic effort is underway to create the first national standard to protect workers from extreme heat.
Sometimes I get asked, well, what's this going to cost? And the answer is, what does it cost not to do it? What's the cost in human lives? What's the cost in human suffering? It is better for everybody when workers do well.
We wanted to understand why it's taken so long to secure these life-saving measures and the reality of life without them.
Si no vamos preparados, nos puede pasar muchas cosas en el campo.
Abel Cruz Cabrera has been working on tobacco and sweet potato farms in North Carolina for 16 years.
Compramos lo que es agua embotellada. Tenemos un cooler, cada quien se compra un cooler y avienta lo que es el agua embotellada. Tenemos igual los Gatorades y traemos de México un suero.
¿Y todo comprado por ustedes?
Sí.
¿El patrón les da
agua?
¿Agua?
No.
No.
El patrón, el que yo tengo, nunca nos ha puesto agua voluntariamente.
¿Miki qué trae?
Miki, aquí trae Gatorade.
No, él no le importa el trabajador, él le importa su trabajo.
Farm workers have some of the fewest labor protections of any workers in the U.S., leaving them 35 times more likely to die from heat-related illnesses.
We're going to visit some workers, talk about what's been going on at their farms.
Leticia Zavala works with El Futuro Es Nuestro, a group organizing farm workers and advocating for improved working conditions. She's on a mission to prevent any more deaths from extreme heat in the fields.
Entonces, como compañeros, si nosotros hubiéramos escuchado a un trabajador decir, hey, yo no me siento mal, como compañeros, ¿ustedes qué creen que nos toca a nosotros hacer? Ayudarlo. ¿En qué forma?
Are there any heat protections in place for farm workers?
Heat specific, not in North Carolina. I don't understand why it's not happening other than the fact that growers see our people as disposable.
Right now, only 5 states have heat safety standards. So for many workers, the only protections come from looking out for one another.
Yo a veces les digo, vale más mi vida que meter una o 2 horas más, que sería unos $30. Sí. Vale más mi vida que ganarme $30.
Growers tend to do math a lot for workers, right? Especially H2A workers. It's like, it cost me $1,200 to get you here. It's gonna cost me so much to give you guys a break.
Most of the farm workers here are coming from Mexico on what's called H2A visas. Workers are completely tied to the employers who bring them here, working in their fields, living on their property. And all of that can make it difficult for workers to speak up about unsafe conditions.
People are working themselves to death because they want to be productive for their employer.
Last year, at least 2 migrant farm workers died in North Carolina from heat-related illnesses. Another had died just over a week before we started filming. And because these deaths often go unreported, the Department of Labor estimates that heat-related fatalities could be 14 times higher than official counts.
For every one case that does go public, there's like, I don't know how many, 15, 50, 100, I don't know, that do not.
Flor Herrera Picasso is the executive director of Casa Azul, a community organization in Wilson, North Carolina. After the death of farm worker Jose Arturo Gonzalez Mendoza last year, she raised $12,000 to support his widow, Maria Guadalupe Manriquez Vázquez, and their 2 children.
Hola, María.
Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes. ¿Cómo estás?
Jose Arturo passed away 11 days after he started working at Barnes Farming in North Carolina.
Pues que tristemente a nosotros nos quitaron lo único que teníamos. Porque como le digo, pues él lo era todo, pues era nuestra familia, ahora nosotros estamos incompletos. Para ellos es como todo, era un trabajador más. Ellos ya pudieron reemplazarlo tal vez, pero yo en mi familia y en mi vida nunca lo voy a poder reemplazar. Ni nunca va a haber otra persona que pueda ser el papá de mis hijos. Porque ellos siempre les va a faltar él y a mí también. Como le digo, para ellos es fácil reemplazarlo, pero para nosotros no. Porque él ya no va a regresar nunca.
So, just to give a little update on Jose Arturo, there was a fine that was put in place of $197,000 against the grower for a number of violations. The grower appealed and had a very aggressive legal strategy. They subpoenaed myself, they subpoenaed Casa Azul, they subpoenaed all organizations that do outreach to that labor camp in order to request us to release names of all the workers who we had spoken to and what we had spoken to them about. Just recently, the Department of Labor announced that they had changed the fine from $187,000 to $3,000. They haven't released any information as to why, but we know that there was a lot of legal investments done so that this fine could be reduced. The owner is a state senator, and we believe there's also political movements there and political power. And so right now we continue to fight so that Jose Arturo gets fair workers' comp and that his family receives justice, right? But we have used Jose Arturo's story to educate workers. And we have on the fields, we have a campaign called the Collective Responsibility Campaign, where we're out with workers talking about what is it that keeps us from asking for medical attention, and what is it that keeps us from speaking up. And their stories of pride, their stories of bullying within peers, their stories of fear, there's economic pressures, and at the end of the training, it's basically like a commitment from each other to take care of each other, because it's hard. It's hard to, when you make a sacrifice to leave your family, to come and work and find opportunity, it's hard for them to walk away from that. And so we get a lot of help and support from our allies. We distributed over 10,000 hydration packets. We have a health and safety committee of over 100 workers that are out in the fields, checking up on their workers, being trained on first aid, and reporting any health and safety hazards that they see on the job. But we're fighting federally for protections. We're asking the labor commissioner in the state of North Carolina to convene a meeting with stakeholders so we can address issues with heat and find something that suits all of us. They've refused to answer our request, and so we're continuing to push for that. But we've also started dialoguing with tobacco companies and asking them what the possibility is of implementing some sort of heat protections within their code of ethics with their purchasing agents. Tobacco companies have all these rules that tobacco growers have to follow, like what kind of pesticide can be used, what color the tobacco should be when it's harvested, how big it should be, and all these requirements on taking care of the tobacco, but no requirements for how to take care of the workers that are working in tobacco. So we're going to continue pushing through. These are our basic demands, and we're going to continue asking for this to be protected. We're asking people to get involved. We have a list serve. We're always asking for volunteers. We need drivers. Drivers take workers to clinics. Drivers take workers to meetings, to events, spread the word, host an event. We just had a story this year that just really broke my heart. There was another worker who, again, it was his first year here. He arrived on Thursday. He worked Friday and Saturday. And on Monday, the water ran out, like in the middle of the day. And when the grower came back with the water, he just started screaming like water, water, and he was going around in circles. And eventually he passed out. He was in a coma for 3 weeks. When he woke up, he was like permanently brain damaged. So he doesn't know how to speak. He doesn't know how to walk. He doesn't know how to fend for himself. His wife was 7 months pregnant, and the grower fired his father and his brother because they were at the hospital too many days with him. And then they were forced to go back to Mexico. They ended up rejecting some of the medical attention because they didn't have anywhere to stay. And so they went back to Mexico. And those are the types of things that we see constantly. This year during the big heat wave, a lot of workers were calling us saying, hey, I told the grower I was sick. I started vomiting. I got in the shade so I could, feel better. And now I'm fired, or now I'm being punished. And those are the kinds of things that we fight against on a daily basis. And I think I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions.
Yes, please submit any questions you have through that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get them answered. I just had a question, and I would love to hear your response, Leticia. It's kind of a two-part question. what is your understanding of how this connects back to the climate crisis and climate justice? And also the second part of that question is like, do the farm workers see it as something that ties back to the climate crisis? Is that a connection that's made to them when they're talking about heat, or is it just like, this is what I experience in my day to day? Yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, definitely. Part of the collective responsibility training starts with two questions on climate justice and the fact that it is the number one, heat is the number one killer um uh for natural disasters that kills workers. And so we have this conversation. It's tough, right? Because workers workers in Mexico, a lot of them come from indigenous communities where there's a relationship with the land and where you ask permission before you start plowing and digging and planting. You know, there's a relationship, and here there isn't. And workers see that and they understand, um and they see it as like, because it's a country that focuses on money, right? And that's how they see it. um Definitely in like the bigger farms and in the spaces where there's more and more farmland being used up, like workers understand that as being bad and unhealthy, for them and for and for Earth, right? And for the future of our food system. But I think that's as far as we go.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate your connection back to Indigenous roots and Indigenous community. I think that um, there are many aspects brought forth by Indigenous communities that are rooted in respecting the earth, giving back to the earth, these ideas about environmentalism and taking care of the land. And I think that really continues through many Hispanic and Latino ways of life.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to refer to the Q&A section to see what questions we have. We had a first question is the forced meal plan legal in North Carolina?
There are parts of it that are legal. So employers can provide meals to workers, but they still have to have access to kitchens, which is the violation, right? Unfortunately, we filed complaints with the Department of Labor, and they say that the only way to really catch them is if they come on a day where they find the kitchen locked. But the kitchen is going to be locked in the afternoons or weekends. And because it's the policy of OSHA to call an employer before they come and do an inspection and to give notice, then the grower has noticed that they're coming to inspect that the kitchen isn't locked. So guess what? When they come, the kitchen isn't locked. So we have been able to address issues on wages, because there's another component, which is they bring women to be cooks for the forced meal plan. And for example, we had a case where women were working 4 a.m. to 7 p.m. and they were getting paid $300 for the week when they were working 6 days a week, more than 14-hour days. So we've been able to address some of that. That was actually a trafficking case that ended up being, because they were always also being threatened.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, thank you for sending that question in. Hopefully that response answers your question. Another question we got sorry, one second. Okay. Sorry, I'm seeing that someone is trying to raise their hand, and I'm not sure how to let you answer a question. I'm sorry about that. If you see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, please feel free to listen in or to submit your question there. Hopefully we can get to you. Another question that was asked, what reps and senators at the state legislature can we contact regarding this problem with heat? Which ones are connected to these farms with work camps?
I think the biggest one that we would like to understand and for her to address her issues, especially because she owns a farm, is Lisa Barnes. She's the state senator where Jose Arturo passed away. And it would be good, since she's had that experience, for her to set the example and implement some heat protections, at least on her farm.
Mm-hmm.
And then also probably Labor Commissioner Luke Farley. We really need to have a conversation with him. We need to bring all the stakeholders. Heat is affecting all of us, and it's not just the workers, right? This year, the tobacco harvest was sped up because of the heat. The tobacco was maturing a lot faster than normal seasons. And so right now, before there used to be no gap between the tobacco and the sweet potato, right now there's going to be a 1 month gap there between the tobacco and the sweet potato in some farms, because the tobacco grew too fast and the sweet potato was delayed because of the heat.
Mm-hmm. I know that El Futuro Es Nuestro was trying to set up a meeting with Luke Farley. Was there any progress made there to get him at the table?
Nope, they've stopped responding to our requests, and so we believe that he needs to hear from from the state and people who vote. Maybe that'll get his attention again.
Yes, absolutely. So Lisa Barnes and Luke Farley are two good people to get in contact with in the state legislature. Another question that was asked that I think I would really love to hear your response on as well is the treatment these farmers are receiving because they are immigrants, and why doesn't normal decency apply for these workers as it would for other types of workers, construction, forestry, etc.?
Well, I think agriculture has historically received some protections. Like farmers have historically been, I don't know how to call it, pampered. Farmers have historically been pampered, right? Like since slavery. And the lack of laws in agriculture are because of racism, because mostly they're either, back in the day, they were Black workers, right? Then there were immigrant workers. These workers are H-2A workers. They are here with legal statuses, and they're brought here specifically to work because they can't find U.S. workers to do the job. There's definitely a race issue, but at the end of the day, it's millionaires trying to make money, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Corporations seeing workers as equipment and not as humans.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I see that we got a question in the chat. What can we do to help? I feel like that's partially been answered. And then also, who is the state senator / grower who had the drastic reduction in his fine down to only $3,000?
That was Lisa Barnes. And
okay.
Yes, contacting Lisa Barnes, contacting Luke Farley. We have drives for heat health and safety kits for our committees. where we ask for hydration packets, we ask for reusable ice packets, first aid kits, bandanas, so you can have drives in your churches or in your schools and get them to us during the spring of next year.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate those suggestions. And I think in the same line of what can we do to help, someone asked, they said they would be interested in hearing more specifically about how workers can help take care of each other.
Yes. So we have this collective responsibility training, and workers make a commitment that if a worker looks like he's sick, but he doesn't want to go to the doctor, or he's scared, or somebody's already passed out and the grower is not calling 911, they call 911. There's actual farms that forbid people from calling 911. And a lot of workers who come here don't know what 911 is. I was surprised when we started doing the trainings that a lot of workers did not know what 911 is, and they didn't understand how that was. And so we're also asking a lot of health professionals that visit farms and a lot of health clinics to talk to workers about not being scared of the expenses and how expensive it's gonna be if they end up going to the hospital or to the clinic, because that's also a fear that workers have. We have a doctor that is on call voluntarily just to provide advice, and so he's been teaching workers about how to hydrate yourself correctly, why sodas are bad, what kind of foods they can eat better to improve their health. And so we have some of that support. And then basically it's just watching out for each other and informing us and calling the doctor when people get sick.
Wow, yeah. I mean, that's so interesting to hear that workers were coming and didn't even know what 911 was and didn't know who to contact in times of help. And I think it really shows why that collective responsibility program that y'all are heading is so important, to show workers what they can do for themselves and what they can do for each other, to really create that community of support. Another question we got is anyone suing them over these labor practices?
We need legal support. We've had a hard time finding lawyers that are willing to do pro bono stuff. We have a hard time with being able to collect sometimes information and for workers to get to that point. We have filed our first complaints. Last year, we got 7 growers fined for lack of water in North Carolina. And so we're starting with that. But we do need, if people have recommendations for lawyers, please send them.
Yeah, thank you. And we also got a clarifying question just about the protections that farm workers do or don't have. Someone asked and just wanted to be clear that growers do not have to provide water for their workers. Is that correct?
They do. There has to be water in the fields within 2/3 of a mile. That's what the law says. But what we see is that sometimes the water will be on top of the tractor at the end of the row, and workers are not allowed to drink water until the end of the row. Or it'll be in the bus or another machine, and it'll be driving so fast that workers really can't drink water. Sometimes it's dirty, sometimes it's hot. So it's not that the water's not there, it's the fact that they don't have access to it that we're fighting for. And oftentimes they don't. Like, for example, Abel mentioned it in the video. His grower does not provide water. The workers bring water.
Yeah, that's horrifying. Are there any labor unions speaking for these workers and advocating for these workers?
We do work and we have collaborated with different organizations and unions like the electrical workers, the United Service workers. There's been other unions that we've collaborated with on heat issues and protections for workers. We came out of a union, right? I was fired from the union that I was working for, and a lot of our founders were members of a union in North Carolina that has unfortunately sided with the growers, taking the stance that heat protections would be too expensive for growers and it would put farms out of business. So,
yeah, definitely disappointing to hear that those big unions aren't doing enough to address these concerns or protect the workers. On a similar note about who you're working with, we got a question about asking if you have ever worked with the North Carolina Justice Center or the Farm Worker Advocacy Network.
We are members of the Farm Worker Advocacy Network. We're actually bringing the Progressive Caucus to a farm on September 30th with the Farm Worker Advocacy Network. And the Farm Worker Justice Center has helped us on a number of different legal issues.
Okay, that's good to hear. Another question that we got, and thank you everyone for being so patient as we get to everything. We're trying to get to all of your questions. Thank you for putting all your thoughts in the chat. Someone asked, can planting and picking crops be shifted to earlier spring months and later fall months to kind of, I guess, avoid those months of extreme heat?
I mean, it's the crops rely not just on heat but also on rain and things like that. So I mean, growers are beginning to make certain adjustments, like trying to plant earlier or sooner, but it's all kind of being tested, you know. And I mean, we got really hot summer, but then it was 60 degrees last week. So yeah, it's just everything's so very unpredictable.
Yeah, absolutely unpredictable. And I'm sure as time continues, we'll keep exploring solutions to help mitigate some of those risks of heat and heat exposure. A question in the chat was, when weather disasters such as severe storms occur, can we assume that workers are also vulnerable in their living quarters? It seems like they are on the front lines of climate crisis in multiple ways.
Oh my gosh, yes. In different ways. For example, last year, the storm Debbie flooded a lot of the tobacco, and there were a lot of workers that were forced to go back to Mexico without earning any money. And then Helene hit in the Christmas trees, and we had a situation where a grower had gasoline, for example, that she was using because the workers were still working when they didn't have electricity, but she wasn't willing to give them gasoline so that they could put in their generator, right? Because she wanted to save it for the saws and to cut down the Christmas trees. But yeah, I think last year we had the camp that was without electricity the most was for 3 weeks. and they were very difficult to get to. So we had a hard time sending food out that way. And then there's also always an issue with food being culturally, how do you say it? Adequate, right? Like workers were receiving cans that they didn't know what they were. And so they weren't eating it because they were like, we don't know what it is. We don't know how to make it or cook it. And so, but yeah, there's that issue. And there's also an issue because a lot of farms do not have the requirement to have addresses. 911 does not get to them as quickly because they don't have addresses. So, and they're not registered, for example, in the county as vulnerable communities or vulnerable population.
Wow, that's interesting and disheartening. Yeah, definitely these farm workers are on the front lines in a variety of different ways, but are underrepresented in conversations like these. So we're definitely lucky to be able to hear from you tonight and hopefully uplift those messages a little bit more. A question is, are there any mobile medical clinics that can help workers, or would they not be allowed on the property?
Yes, there's a lot of organizations that provide medical services, and some of them do have clinics. Some of them have access issues. They should not because workers have tenant rights, but growers often still try to keep organizations out. I would say there's still not enough, right? There's still a lack of medical attention services for workers.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always a need. Someone asked, is there any need for drives local to Durham, North Carolina? They were interested in helping out, but aren't able to travel east from Durham. Is there any need here in the Triangle?
Most workers are out in the country, and usually that's the request, is that we bring them in from like rural North Carolina into like a city for meetings or things like that. There's always, whenever we do a request for drivers, we always announce where it's gonna be and about the time commitment that there is. So if they're just on our listserv, then they see opportunities, they can jump in.
Right. And maybe there's a possibility of helping organize a drive here in the Triangle, but setting up transportation so it gets east. That might be a solution to that question. So these final questions are kind of just about the path forward. Someone suggested speaking with Senator Murdoch. If you haven't already, they work with the North Carolina, or the person who asked this question works with the North Carolina Climate Solutions Coalition and the North Carolina Disaster Response and Resilience Network, and said that Senator Murdoch is on the Agriculture Committee and has been very supportive and sympathetic to the work that we are doing around biomass and the health effects on impacted communities. I hope she may be able to join this conversation if she's not already a part of the conversation on farm worker rights.
Yeah, if there's a contact that they could share, or if somebody's willing to connect with us. We haven't worked with her, but we'd be interested.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I can repeat the organizations that I just listed. So it was the North Carolina Climate Solutions Coalition and the North Carolina Disaster Response and Resilience Network. Someone from there said they have worked with Senator Murdoch before. And Anita, who asked the question, if you could please either put in the chat a good contact for Senator Murdoch so Leticia can get involved, or maybe we can set up a way for you guys to interface and she can make that introduction for you.
Mm-hmm.
that would be really helpful.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Anita.
Yes, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. And she said also, in addition, like, thank you for this webinar. And I hope we can collectively shed light on this issue. So there's a lot of people here who are very supportive of the work that you do and are excited to help be support where they can be. Some of the last few questions we have: has the ACLU ever gotten involved in farm workers' rights? Have you ever been in contact with them either?
No, we haven't been in touch with them recently on farm workers. We know that they're doing a lot with immigrant workers generally, with Siembra, but we haven't reached out to them for our issues.
Mm-hmm. Is there
and for that
sorry, go ahead.
We should maybe try. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. They could be a good resource. And Siembra is another good organization in North Carolina addressing some immigrant concerns. A question about health concerns. There's a concern in public health circles about the increase in kidney disease from occupational heat stress and dehydration. Are workers learning about prevention and danger signs of chronic kidney disease? And then I guess more broadly, what do the health education programs that you offer encompass?
We're organizers, not health educators, so we're just kind of having conversations and helping them have those as peers. We bring in some professionals every now and then. The thing is that there's not a lot of information, right? And about long-term effects of dehydration. Like, we see workers developing kidney disease, and we haven't been able to link it to the constant heat stress symptoms that they have. And so it's hard. I think and it's a matter of also inviting some universities and some big medical researchers to come and get involved and to run studies with these issues.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And remind me, I can't remember if you've already covered this, but are you guys working with any health professionals right now as a part of your programs, or is that something that you're looking for?
We have done some collaboration with folk like NC Field, but not a lot. We would like to collaborate more.
Okay, thank you. And then the final question that I am seeing is, in which counties do these H-2A workers work in?
Well, they're all over the state. There's 27 different crops. Last year we saw over 15,000 H-2A workers come into the state to harvest. They're really in almost every county in the state.
Right.
But primarily in the east, Nash, Wilson, Edgecombe, Johnston, Harnett, Sampson, Wayne.
Yeah, primarily in the east, but to my understanding, there are some farm working opportunities out west with like the Christmas tree industry. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, Ash, Allegheny, and Watauga have a lot of Christmas tree H-2A workers.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much for getting to that. And that was the last question I saw. If I missed anything, please feel free to send it in the chat quickly or in the Q&A section. But I just want to thank you all for taking the time to attend this webinar tonight. We are really lucky to hear from Leticia. She's amazing. She's doing really amazing work in this field where that is often underrepresented and often ignored. So I'm really happy that there are people like her doing this work to uplift the issue of extreme heat and the impacts on our farm workers. It's really amazing. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Leticia.
Oh, no. No, I was trying to react, but there wasn't a heart.
Oh, okay. No worries. Well, thank you. And we're just really lucky to hear from someone like Leticia. Her organization is doing really great work. She dropped a few links in the chat. If you guys can look, you can find the website for El Futuro Es Nuestro. You can find an opportunity to sign up for the newsletter. And if you guys are interested in volunteering or getting further involved, you can find those on the website or in the newsletter. Or if you also want to donate as well, there will be an opportunity to do that on the website. I highly recommend, if you have the capacity and ability to get involved, you definitely should. El Futuro Es Nuestro is a great organization and could always use help. And yeah, I think we are really happy that you guys were all able to attend. We will be sharing a recording and links with the attendees afterward. And yeah, I think that's all we had for today. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you all. Have a good one. Thanks, Gabby. Thank you to all NC Warren.